Welcome to the Creative Commons RX podcast. Before diving into this episode, I want to ensure we're all on the same page. This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.
You know, when we think about treating someone who's been poisoned, our minds usually jump straight to those dramatic scenes from movies, right? But the real-world science of medical toxicology, it's so much more nuanced and honestly, way more interesting than Hollywood ever lets on. So, let's start with that classic TV scenario. A patient gets rushed to the ER after swallowing something dangerous. The first thing they do is pump their stomach. That's always step one, right? Well, for a long time, that might have been true. But today, the answer has totally changed. And digging into why it changed reveals this massive shift in how medicine thinks about poisoning. Yeah, we've learned that those really aggressive, do-it-every-time interventions you see on screen, they aren't always the best or even the safest way to go. The reality of decontamination is a lot more thoughtful and a lot more scientific. The big takeaway here is that modern toxicology has really moved away from a one-size-fits-all playbook. It's a field that's always evolving, and there's this clear trend toward being less aggressive, more deliberate. It's all about avoiding what the experts call a knee-jerk response. Okay, so if we're not just rushing in anymore, what is the goal? Well, it's actually super simple and logical. It's all about stopping the poison right in its tracks before the body has a chance to absorb it. The whole point of decontamination is to limit the absorption of xenobiotics. That's just a fancy scientific term for any foreign substance. Could be a medication, could be a chemical. The key is to stop these things from getting into the bloodstream where they can do the real damage. To pull this off, a doctor basically becomes a detective. For every single case, they're weighing the risks and the benefits. They're thinking, what exactly is the toxin? How is the patient doing? And most importantly, how long ago did this happen? Time is absolutely everything. And that brings us to the most common tool in the decontamination kit, activated charcoal. You've probably heard of it, but the way it works is just pure, elegant chemistry. Now, the key word here is adsorption, with a D. This is not absorption, which is like a sponge soaking up water. Adsorption is when molecules just stick to a surface. The lint roller is the perfect way to think about it. It doesn't soak up the lint, it just grabs onto it. And this is why charcoal is such a powerhouse. It's incredibly porous, which gives it a gigantic surface area. So as it travels through your stomach and intestines, toxins literally stick to its surface, just like lint on that roller. Then, the charcoal and all those trapped toxins just pass harmlessly out of the body. They never even get a chance to be absorbed. But, and this is a huge but, charcoal is not a magic bullet. It's actually super picky about what it binds to. It works great for a lot of common medications and organic compounds, especially those fat-soluble drugs. But for things like metals, iron, lithium, or alcohols and caustic stuff, it's pretty much useless. The toxins just don't stick. Which brings us right back to that thoughtful, evidence-based approach. A doctor is only going to consider using charcoal if it's the right kind of substance, if it happened pretty recently, usually within an hour or two, and if the patient can actually handle taking it. If the answer to any of those is no, it's probably not the right move. In fact, using it in the wrong situation can be downright dangerous. If a patient is drowsy and can't protect their airway, they could breathe the charcoal into their lungs, which is a really serious problem. And obviously, giving it for something it doesn't even bind to, well, that's all risk and zero benefit. And this is wild. In rare cases, especially if someone gets multiple doses, the charcoal itself can cause trouble. It can form a pharmacobazaar. It's basically a solid rock-like mass of charcoal and medication that can block up the bowel. I mean, look at these images. It's a powerful reminder that every single intervention has risks. So what do you do for the stuff that charcoal can't touch, like iron or lithium? If you can't make it stick, you gotta flush it out. This is where Plan B comes in. It's called whole bowel irrigation. And the principle behind it is incredibly simple. It's a mechanical cleanse. You give someone large volumes of a special electrolyte solution to literally wash the entire GI tract out from top to bottom. And this is where it's a total game changer. For those heavy metals like iron that charcoal just ignores, WBI is the answer. It's also vital for things like extended release pills that are made to dissolve slowly, or in some pretty extreme cases for body packers to get drug packets out before they can rupture. Okay, so we've been focused a lot on things people swallow, right? But these decontamination principles apply to all kinds of exposures. It's not just about what's in the gut. When something toxic hits the skin, it is all about speed. The first, most critical steps are to get any contaminated clothing off immediately and just flood the area with water. The goal is simple: dilute and remove before the skin can absorb it. Same thing for the eyes, but it's even more urgent. The second an exposure happens, that clock is ticking. You have to start washing the eye out immediately with water or saline to get that chemical away and prevent any permanent damage. And for inhaled toxins, the first step is the most intuitive one you can imagine. Get the person to fresh air. Remove them from the source of the poison. After that, it's all about supportive care, mostly making sure they're getting enough oxygen. So, whether we're talking about charcoal, irrigation, or just plain old water, the one theme that ties all of modern decontamination together is this careful, considered, and judicious approach. And you know, this quote from our source material just perfectly sums up this whole explainer. The era of the automatic, knee-jerk reaction, it's over. It's been replaced by a really careful consideration of the toxin, the patient, and the risks versus the benefits. So we want to leave you with this final thought. We started by questioning that obvious TV trope of pumping the stomach, and what we found was a much more complex, much more interesting reality. It really makes you wonder, if the most common sense answer isn't always the right one in medicine, what other assumptions should we be questioning?
This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.